Hey guys, welcome to Book Babe Beauty. And if this is your first time watching, my name is Erica, and today I am going to do another book review. On my channel, I like to talk about makeup and books, and so today I'm going to talk about books while I'm doing my makeup because I need to do my makeup anyway. So while I'm putting on my makeup, I'm going to let you know about the newest book that I read, and I am excited to tell you about this one. It is a book called Warrior Blue, and it is written by an author named Kelsey Kingsley, and she is an indie author, and I have actually been following her for quite some time. I began following her on Instagram when I was pursuing my own writing. In the indie author world, there tends to be this kind of camaraderie where you follow each other, you kind of support each other, and she was one of the authors very early on that I added on my Instagram and then added on my Facebook. And so I still periodically see her post things on Facebook, and she has quite a fan base on her Facebook page. They are constantly posting things on her page in support of her, and I love this author because she kind of fits my aesthetic. She is really into like horror and kind of spooky and dark things, and I love that kind of stuff. And of course, she writes romance novels, and this is the first novel of hers that I've read. And I feel guilty that it's taken me this long to read something by her. But it has, and I'm glad that I picked this book to start off with. I'm sure her other novels are just as great, but this one it was fantastic, and I can't give her enough praise for her skills at putting this story together and making it so believable and so relatable. And so I'm going to tell you about it and get ready and let you know what I think. So Kelsey has quite a few books on Amazon, and I don't know exactly how many. On her About Me page, it says that she's written 9. I typically tend to gravitate towards books that, have quite a big fan base, or authors that already have quite a big fan base, or books that have a lot of reviews, just so I know what I'm getting into before I take the time to read something. And that's not really fair because I know how difficult it is to get your work seen by other people. And if everybody's judging a book based on how many reviews it has, it's not really telling of, the actual story. And you might be missing a really great story by not giving that author a chance. But I just think that this author has an amazing ability to tell a story in such a believable and emotional and riveting way. The story is not at all what I was expecting. In fact, it's not like any other romance novel that I've read before, because normally all of the romance novels that I've read before have all been from a female's perspective. And this one was entirely from a male's perspective. Now, I've read novels where it switches perspectives, where the female will be recounting the storyline from her point of view, and then it'll switch to the male where he will be recounting the story from his point of view. But this one was entirely by the male's point of view, and I feel like that is a pretty impressive feat on its own, because I think typically we would gravitate towards more of the stereotypes of the male's persona, but she really kept it genuine when it came to the male lead character. So the male lead character, his name is Blake. He is a really talented tattoo artist, and he works at a shop and lives in Salem. And most of his artwork and most of his tattoos tend to be gritty in nature, very gritty and dark and without color. And most of that has to do with the fact that he is just kind of, he sees the world in a very dark way. He faced quite a bit of tragedy in his past. Blake has a twin brother, and his name is Jake. This is where his tormented past comes to play. Blake's twin brother Jake is disabled, and he has not always been that way. In fact, his brother Jake was once a very talented artist himself, which is why Blake is so conflicted in his life, because he knows what Jake could have made of himself, as he got older. And he knows that he could have been very successful at anything that he wanted to do. Blake feels a lot of blame for the reason why Jake can no longer pursue his talents. And much of Blake's life is spent caring for his brother Jake. He picks him up every morning at his parents' house, wakes him up, gets him dressed, and gets him his breakfast. And then he takes him to an adult daycare where they care for people who are disabled or who have special needs. And then he goes to work, and at the end of the day, he goes back and picks up his brother and takes him back to his parents' house, and that is his life. Every Saturday he has one day off where he just takes it to himself and does things like go to a poetry bar, and he does write a bit of poetry. Most of it is dark, and it's mostly just venting his frustrations and aggressions. 6 out of 7 days of the week, Blake spends taking care of Jake, and he really doesn't have a whole lot of time to himself, but he also really doesn't think he's deserving of having time for himself. He feels like his responsibility is to care for Jake, to help care for Jake, and to function as a normal citizen and go to work and do all of the things that a normal person would. While Blake continued to go about his usual day caring for Jake and also being full of self-loathing, he did not expect that one tattoo would change the course of his life. So when Audrey, the main female character in the story, walked through the door of the tattoo shop that he worked at first he wanted nothing to do with the tattoo that she wanted. Blake was ready to let somebody else in the shop take Audrey's request for what she wanted done, because what she wanted was something that every basic girl wanted, and that was a generic and unoriginal butterfly. He wanted to actually do art, and he wanted to do the dark, kind of gritty art that he preferred, not some cutesy little butterfly. But Audrey was persistent that it needed to be him that did the tattoo. And her reasoning was because Blake was actually the one who tattooed her sister. And her sister actually got the same butterfly tattoo. And he did not recognize that he'd done this butterfly tattoo. But what really pulled at his heartstrings or made him feel guilty for the way that he was treating Audrey was the fact that Audrey admitted that her sister was now deceased and she wanted to get that same tattoo. So of course Blake felt guilty. He knew he'd been a jerk to Audrey, and the last thing that he wanted was to give not only himself a bad reputation, because word spreads quickly, he gets his work by word of mouth, but he didn't also want to give the shop a bad name. But in the back of his mind, while he was doing Audrey's tattoo, it plagued him because, she said that he had done her sister's tattoo, but he had no recollection of her sister or this tattoo. And it bothered him because, he thought he remembered doing a butterfly. I mean, it's not something that he typically did. And also, this butterfly incorporated a little bit of color, and that definitely wasn't something that he typically incorporated in his work. What he didn't expect after doing the tattoo for Audrey was that somehow in his daily routine, when he's followed the same routine for so long, that Audrey would somehow keep popping up. Now, Blake was not somebody who ever considered that that was somehow fate. He was definitely not a believer in fate. If anything, her insistence in popping up in random places that he was at just annoyed him. And because it annoyed him so much that Audrey kept appearing everywhere, whenever he would see her, he would do everything possible to try and avoid her. But even as much as Blake tried to avoid Audrey every time that he saw her, Audrey definitely did not go without saying something to him. And he couldn't understand why this girl would try to come up to him or make conversation outside of getting this tattoo from him, because she was the polar opposite of him. He was this dark, bearded guy, always dressed in black, and here she was, this Barbie of a girl. She definitely did not look like anybody who he would ever hang out with in his normal life. So when she did try to make conversation with him, he was still kind of cold to her. But over time, the more that he became acquainted with Audrey, the more that he was intrigued by her. And she started taking up residence in his thoughts. The more that Audrey continued to infiltrate the thoughts of Blake, the more that it angered him because he didn't have the time of day to give Audrey. Now, for a few years now, Blake had been seeing a therapist, and even though, his therapist was meant to help him open up, even with her, he was unable to really let himself open up. But he did tell her about what was happening when Audrey entered his life. And every time that she showed up somewhere, he would tell his therapist. And his therapist saw this as an opportunity for him to connect with somebody because he was so closed off, and she knew that he didn't really have a life outside of taking care of his brother. She encouraged Blake to try and connect with Audrey because she told him it seems like there is a reason why she keeps popping up in your life. And he wanted to have nothing to do with it because he was sure that she was implying that it was fate, that Audrey kept making a presence in his life, and he did not believe any of that garbage. He didn't believe in fate. He just thought it was all coincidence. His therapist really tried to encourage him, even though he was against thinking that it was fate that Audrey kept showing up in unexpected places during his daily routine. At least if he didn't believe that it was fate, maybe he could answer the questions as to why he was so bothered by this girl or why he was so intrigued by her. Hey guys, so I'm sorry, I wanted to do my entire look on camera today, but I started not feeling good, so I had to take a little break, and then I just finished my makeup. But the reason why I wanted to do my look on camera today was because I did another inspired eyeshadow look based on the book, because in the book, the butterfly tattoo was part gritty with a splash of watercolored blue, and so I wanted to do a look based on that. Blake was encouraged by his therapist to seek out the reasons for why Audrey kept appearing in his life, and he really just didn't want to do that. He was very adamant that he was going to stay away from Audrey and avoid her at all costs. And the more that they kept meeting, the more conversation that they had, eventually Blake started to let his walls down, and Audrey started to get to know him and he started to get to know her. As far as their, love story goes, the more that they got to know each other, the more conflict that Blake faced with his guilt and in whether to pursue a relationship with Audrey or even a friendship. He just didn't think that he deserved to have happiness, and that his parents were part of the reason why he felt so guilty and why he felt so undeserving, because they were a constant reminder to him as to why Jake ended up the way that he did. I think this romance novel is so atypical of any other romance stories I've ever read. Blake is not your stereotypical brooding guy who is incapable of love. He just doesn't think that he is deserving of it. And unlike in other stories, he's not a jerk because he's rich and powerful. He's just very guarded and reserved because of the tragedy and the torment that he's had to face. He also doesn't have, the materialistic and cash offerings that a lot of those typical romance novels do, where they're, big and powerful and rich and they can take care of the female. He really is a very stripped down version of that, and he's more real, and he just offers all that he can to Audrey when it gets to that point, and that is his selflessness and his love, and that's what he offers to, everyone he's around. I'm just so glad that I read this novel because I never gave Kelsey's books a chance before, and I think I was afraid to read Kelsey's books before because when I first was acquainted with her on social media during the time that I was writing, I was kind of intimidated to read other indie authors' novels just for fear of seeing exactly who my competition was. And I just think that did such a disservice to Kelsey. I should have read her books a long time ago. This is the first book that I've ever read from her, and it won't be the last. I think she truly has a gift, and she created such a powerful story with such realness and grit, and it just made the characters seem more relatable. And I could feel the emotion of the characters, and I could feel the connections when they started, and they just seemed really authentic. They didn't seem forced, they didn't seem fake, and their connections weren't influenced by money or the lavish things in life. They were just two normal people, and it all stemmed from one tattoo. I truly recommend this book to anyone, especially if you love romance novels. It just truly is about the growth of a relationship and the willingness for a person who doesn't think they're deserving of a relationship to get to the point where they finally lower their walls and let somebody in. And it's just a beautiful story. I will list all of the products that I used today down below. And let me know if you've read this book. Let me know if you've read anything else by Kelsey Kingsley. If you have any book recommendations for me, please let me know in the comments. I am up for any recommendations you have, even if they aren't in the romance genre. I'm not stuck in that genre. It's just what I typically prefer. But I like a lot of different types of books. I just gravitate towards romance. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support and your time, and I'm sorry again that I didn't do the full look of makeup on camera today. I don't know what happened. I just was not feeling good and I just needed to take a moment. The main importance of this video anyway was to let you all know about this book that I read and whether I recommended it or not, and I definitely do recommend it. And I hope you like this video. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you next time. Like I said, if you have any suggestions, leave them for me down below. But thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.